Welcome to Lunch with the Sharpe Crew. We are here yet again. I know we have changed our days, but we're now on Thursdays because that's really the cooler day. So that's where we are right now. And we are talking today about what I think is a very interesting topic. Is sex work, or is it something else? And joining me, as always, for the Lunch Crew is Michael Voss. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. It's been quite a couple of weeks, and I think this will be a nice change of topic.
There we go. Absolutely. And the one and the only PhD, Charlotte Burnett. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Staying busy as always, Larry. So are you, it looks like.
I do tend to stay busy. That's true. However, I do want to bring up this idea, which I think most people talk about when they talk about sex work. They say basically the concept of my body, my choice, right? If I'm a woman, it is my body. I may do what I feel with it. If I want to have sex with someone, I may. Why in the world would the government want to say no to this kind of thing? I think that's probably the first piece that people use when they talk about this. The question, though, is it that simple?
Well, before we even get to that, let's define something, because
okay,
we're falling into another one of the things that we see often from the left. They are redefining, renaming, and trying to normalize and make very nice what we're talking about. We're talking about prostitution. Prostitution.
Sex
not only
sex is a lot more than just prostitution.
Yes, correct. It's not only, it is that, but there's other things too. Charlotte, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So sex work encompasses pornography. It encompasses live streaming cam, which could be one-on-one or have multiple partners. It also includes phone sex that people often forget about, which is still pretty predominant in Europe and the United States. It includes photographs. So not just video work or audio work, but it's the photography of pornography as well. It includes fetish work that some people might not even assume would be sexual at all, like feet, smelling different things, massages of the ears. I mean, there's a whole array of dominatrix work, which might not even include sexual stuff at all. You might just be drinking out of a dog bowl. And so there's a lot of things that we could put underneath sex work.
And yet, when we do that, we keep coming back to the same couple of terms: pornography. And within the pornography, what do we find? We find prostitution. We see it as prostitution in and of itself. We see the online component, which is really still, again, another form of the pornography, which is, again, contained within, or within it is contained, prostitution. Essentially,
legally, it's not.
The key element that we are talking about here, the core thing we are talking about, is going to be prostitution. So that's the main thing. Let's call it what it is, because
but that's not even the largest portion of sex work.
But hold on. The reason why I don't want to do that, Mike, and I get your point, right? You're talking at a massive level. Is basically some woman. This is your thought process, but men too, but heavily more women. Obviously, it's more women than men, but heavily women who are selling their body in some form for dollars.
That's prostitution.
Legal sex work is a $20 billion industry. $26 billion.
But I want to go down an important distinction, though. When you say that, right, people in their mind, when you say prostitution, they're thinking woman on a street corner, I'll take care of you in the back alley.
That is a lot of it.
That's how they're thinking it.
Which is called street sex work.
That's a lot of it.
Yes. Which hold on, I want to be very clear. That is actually a very small portion of sex work. That is a part. And so I want to make sure we're clear on this. Your theoretical definition of a woman selling her body for something is true. But the image that people take when you say prostitution is some woman on the street saying, I'll take care of you in the back alley. And that simply isn't accurate in the imagery. I want to make sure that part is clear.
And when we're talking about selling our bodies, I mean, that's kind of the basis of capitalism. I mean, construction workers, people who work in mines, they're essentially selling their body, and they're taking
No.
a portion of their
Let me
health
finish, Michael, let me
and
finish.
giving it away. I mean, it is a very similar thing. It's throughout capitalism. It's the foundation of what we're doing is we're exuding our body labor to make money to be able to pay our bills. We all do it, and men often do it in a way that ends up harming them in the long term as well.
No, that's a false
Good.
equivalence.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, please.
That's a false equivalence. We're talking about a sexual act versus physical labor. Very different realms. In fact, that's
How
why
are they different?
thing.
Well, I don't know. Let me touch this real fast. I get where you're going, Charlotte, but there is a difference, and it is culturally, right? If a man or any
And moral.
woman, I'm saying man, I keep thinking I should stop being this way. If a person decides to sell their labor for money, even if it hurts their body in the long run, right? They become a lumberjack, they become
Electrician, machinist,
machinist, and it does
mechanic.
affect their body in the long run, right? They have aches and pains, maybe they have actual damage to their body, all those things. Culture says, oh, that is a hard day's work for a day's pay. That is what culture says. If someone goes into the sex industry, that is not what culture says.
Depends on the culture.
Says, hold on, let me finish though. You're saying what difference is. I'm telling you the difference. It is that culture will say, oh, he used his body, she used her body in a sexual manner. They are somehow bad or not good. They are not worthy. They are bad. That is
also look down on people who work in fast food industries.
Correct.
Not
Yes,
the same
you're
thing.
right. I agree with
I
you.
know, and
right?
you keep saying that, Mike, but I'm asking you to define that for me. What there is different then, besides this?
I am telling you, but the cultural aspect is huge. In other words, if I decide to say I'm a woman and I decide to go in an office and work in an office and be a wage slave and get treated horribly by my boss for 10 years, that is not going to affect how society decides to hire me in the future, how my potential boyfriend or girlfriend is going to treat me, how my parents are going to treat me,
Your
how
job
my
definitely influences all of those things, whether you're
No, I'm saying that job compared to me being in sex work. If I'm in a sex work industry, also going to treat me differently. So that, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong either, but I'm just saying
that's a massive difference.
That's the same. Those key factors that you're discussing right now, though, are the same across all industries. Some people view sex work as worse than others, but there are other industries where people also look down on them. And I would say that that's been happening to all, kind of blue collar trades as well. So to say that it's just this cultural thing, I don't think it's just cultural. I think that there's a moral assigned value to sex work, and that is kind of really the underlying perspective. Morally, you would think that we would be like positive about people in the blue collar industry.
Well, yes.
Agreed.
Who are, but traditionally, culturally, we for the last like 20, 30 years, we haven't. We've been looking down on them. Same with farmers.
Since the 80s.
Same with other.
Well, not the 80s.
I would say farmers have been looked down upon all throughout history. It's also the backbone of agrarian racism.
No, they were actually essential. They were always considered essential, especially the more agrarian you become, the more vital. Matter of fact, the first business.
Maybe in rural areas, not in urban areas.
Let's go back to sex work. I'm not letting us go to Israel. We're going to stay here. We're going to stay
But what I'm making a point is culturally that changes. And for sex work, that has not changed. For other industries, it has changed. And so when I'm asking you, like, what is the actual difference, I think it goes back to
developing
the morality factor where there's an underlying religious undertone.
Well, no, I didn't go religious, but one of the key components is the manipulation and accumulation of raw resources and refining those raw resources into products and commodities that can be used by others. So if we want to go really technical, that's one of the aspects of a difference between labor and sex work. But I just wanted to make sure we have this clarification that in various forms, what we're talking about is the selling of bodies, dehumanization, the selling of bodies for money, for remuneration.
I'm not really sure that
whether it takes
everyone
place
feels
online.
it's dehumanizing.
What?
I don't think everyone feels that it's dehumanizing.
No, but
I'm sure the left doesn't.
Even the left. The vast
I would
majority
not call
of humanity,
the sex workers leftists. I don't think all sex workers.
No.
are
Hold on.
leftists.
I'm gonna touch this piece, Charlotte. I do think the vast majority of humanity, left and right, do dehumanize sex workers. I think that's.
I think that's trans
absolutely
political.
true.
I don't think that has anything to do with the left.
I didn't say
You
it
know,
was.
but my
left.
point is, I think most humans say when we attack women and we insult, and feminine attacks are almost always somehow sex shaming, right? Oh, she's loose, she's bad, she's whatever, right? She's you know, I don't want to use the words on, but you know what I'm talking about. That's how when we're doing feminine assaults, attacking people, destroying women's
So do you think
reputation, we're almost always doing that.
Instead of it being based out of like a puritanical kind of religious aspect, you're saying it has rooted in the patriarchy and sexism?
I think it's rooted in humans, period. I think most people, regardless of their background, religious or not, the same as in Japan. I lived in Japan for many years. Japan is not Christian, right? They're Shinto/Buddhist, depending upon where you are within Japan in that area. They look down upon it too, right? They look down upon that. Women like that often will get tattooed because they cannot, they're never going to have a regular relationship in their life. The society will not, the society is unforgiving, right? In that regard, it's unforgiving. In countries like America, many women can have a sex worker, you know, past and still do very well, survive, have relationships in America. In certain countries, no, and it's not. There's no puritanism in Japan. Same in China. China is Buddhist/Hindu, depending on where you go in China.
But does it have to be about the purity of the woman, though?
Yes, that it is about the purity of the woman. Yes.
Sexism.
Why is that sexism?
Yeah.
Because to believe that women have to be pure and men don't.
Who
men
said
can
that?
sleep with whoever they want to. That doesn't get counted as being told that they're a slut.
Yeah, but okay,
or
but
equated to a prostitute or to
but when it comes to this part of men being able to have multiple partners,
right? But the conversation is always around the prostitute, not the John, not the person seeking out the prostitute.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. And the shame is usually associated with the prostitute, not the John.
Correct.
Well, to a lesser degree to the John, but yes, the Johns do have some level of shame as well. Otherwise,
but not she's right. I mean, there is shame on the John. There is. It's just nowhere near the level of the woman.
We hear about politicians and athletes caught with prostitutes all the time, and it's never career ending for them.
Sure, it is.
Maybe publicly painful for like a week.
No, it ends career.
That's incorrect. It is absolutely correct. Yes, it is. Of course. How many politicians have had to resign because they had a sex?
Many.
Oh my God. Yes.
It happens all the time. So that's incorrect.
Yeah, that part's not.
I think that's included in some other scandals, but I would believe that lots of different.
No, that's factually incorrect.
People who are in public eye use prostitutes all the time.
That's factually incorrect, Carl.
When it comes to politicians, that ends their career. Yes, that happens all the time. That part's not true. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say that women get it the same as men.
I mean, look at Donald Trump.
He didn't have any prostitutes.
Oh, he's been with prostitutes. He's been with porn stars. He's admitted to paying for sex.
Factually, that's not correct. There are rumors of that. There have been.
No, he said it on the air.
I know the whole Russian.
Paid for prostitution.
Wait a minute. One of the common things that we've heard over the last 7 years is that there was Donald Trump had paid for prostitutes to pee on Obama's bed when he was in Russia. I know the story, and we know that has been.
That's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Howard Stern show in the 90s.
Hang on.
He's hired lots of prostitutes.
No, I didn't interrupt you. In fact, I was told I stopped myself when I interrupted you. Let me finish my thought. What we're saying here is that's one of the most common rumors and statements that have been made to try and promote this idea that Donald Trump was paying for a bunch of prostitutes. And we know that was completely debunked. It was part of the Russia collusion lie that has been debunked by four investigations, including congressional investigations by Democrats. There is no truth to that. It's part of the Steele dossier, which was completely fabricated and has been proven repeatedly to be a false document.
You made your
point. Let's not repeat that.
Point made. And I don't care. Point made. I don't care. It's not about Trump. I don't care whether Trump.
I understand, but
or not. Point made. All I'm saying here is when it comes to politicians, it does end their careers. That's all I'm saying.
No, you don't. You have Senator David Vitter, Republican from Louisiana. He was still able to keep his seat after being proven
once in a while. But how about Elliot Spitzer, just here in New York?
Great example.
No, Representative Barney Frank. He's a Democrat from Massachusetts, also caught with a prostitute, able to keep position.
Yes,
some people are more powerful than others.
Representative Charles Rangel,
loses
8 ethics violations, still able.
Some are more
I just-
powerful than others, and they
Not
get to move fast.
everyone, but you're what I'm getting from you, Charlotte, which I think is unfair. What I'm getting from you is unfair is the idea that, well, only women are punished and men are only this and that, and that's not true.
I don't think only women can be prostitutes. I think lots of people can be prostitutes. And I think in today's day and age, more men, heterosexual men, are becoming prostitutes.
I think that's true also. And gay men have been prostitutes for a long time. I completely agree.
And now we have like OnlyFans and more open access to cam modeling, and the migration from like hard, discriminatory, hurtful pornography to OnlyFans, where the person owns their content and is able to produce the content that they want, that it's now opening it up to ethical pornography, where women are feeling better about using pornography, and now are going to these types of models to pay men for different type of pornographic and sexual acts.
I'm agreeing with you. Hold on. I want to go back to my point, and maybe I'm messing this up.
No, I don't think so.
What I felt from you, Charlotte, maybe you didn't mean to say, maybe you did, but what I felt from you was you were like, no, Johns get away with murder.
No, I'm saying traditionally the shame doesn't go on the Johns, the shame goes on the women, and that's why.
And what I'm saying is that's incorrect. There is simply a level of shame. Far more goes on the prostitute. I agree. The sex worker gets far more of it, but the John also gets. I'm trying to create a nuance here. It is not. John's get away with murder and prostitutions get everything. No, I think there's shame on both sides. I'm disagreeing with you. There are more, it's clearly more on the worker than the John. But the John, if the John didn't have any shame, if there was none, they wouldn't be going into the alleys. Right?
They oftentimes don't. They go to the brothels.
They wouldn't go to brothels. They'd have
That's the only way to go get it safely done, though.
No, it's not. Safety is a whole other thing. And we'll start with that. Now, before we get there, I did want to mention to the audience when they're watching, if you see me turn my head like this, I mean, Larry and Charlotte know, when I turn my head like this, I'm actually reading what you guys are writing because I can't see my screen unless I actually turn towards it.
Yes.
So I am seeing what everyone is saying here, and you guys are making some very interesting distinctions, but let's get into the safety of it. By the way, did you know that according to May 31st, I did take a note on this, May 31st, 2023, according to 24 studies that have been done around the world in multiple countries over a decade apiece, we can see that there is absolutely no evidence that legalizing prostitution or sex work, whichever word you want to use, whatever makes you comfortable,
author of that study?
Does not. It's actually multiple pieces. It's by Amark Foundation, and they did a compilation of studies going from 1994 to 2014 from around the world, peer-researched. And in all the studies, what you will find, 7 studies say that prostitution, making sex work legalized, is positive. You'll find 8 studies that say no, it actually increases crime, and you have another 8 studies that say it's mixed results. No one's clear. Essentially, the answer is around the world in 102 nations where there is some form of legalization of sex work, you have found that it does not conclusively make anyone better. In fact, I would give you the analogy for a lot of people to give you an idea. What we are getting when we hear about sex work being legalized is Logan's Run. It is the utopia that has been promised to us by the progressive left, the forward, ever leftward movement, that we'll get utopia if we do this because we can. Except the reality is Logan's Run is a dystopia. It is a false image.
Prostitution.
No. Okay, Mike, I'm glad you found that stuff, but there's no way in the world that's true. There's just simply no way in the world that prohibition.
So let me talk to you a little bit about how it makes it safer. So if we put it in places where you are forced to take tests every week to perform prostitution, you are 100% less likely to transmit sexual diseases to others.
That's not what the data says.
Secondly, if you legalize it, people in the sex industry who are victimized, sexually assaulted, or experience violence are able to report it to the police. When it's not legalized, they can't, because then they will face criminalization.
There is
There are
no
only
correlation.
2 states in the United States that protect prostitutes. If you are a prostitute who is raped, even if you have a full-time other employment that you legally are allowed to have, you are not able to access rape compensation funds. So there is a huge deficit of underreported rape and sex crimes and violence against sex workers in the United States and across the world.
Okay, so first, I do not support anyone abusing women in any form. In fact, I don't support anyone being used or abused anywhere in the world, regardless of their sex, gender preference, whatever the hell it is. So let's be clear on that. But the data, according to the world, looking through the various reports, does not support the conclusion that this is going to be better. It doesn't end AIDS. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop the transmission.
How do you spell this foundation's name?
It is A-Mark, M-A-R-K Foundation. And you can look through, it's May 31st, 2023. And you can look through their data. I have it on screen. I can bring it up for you. It is also interesting to find out that what you also find as a correlation, not a fact, but a correlation, that out of 130 nations that were investigated looking at the UN data on sex work, you will tend to find that nations with lower quality of life that are more impoverished tend to have more sex workers, whether it's legal or not. In fact, in the top 5 nations, which would be Brazil, Nigeria, India, Congo, and Indonesia, where you have the largest number of sex workers, you also have some of the lowest quality of life and in poverty, because legalization doesn't raise people up.
That's not helping you at all, Mike. If that's true, first of all, in all those countries, it's illegal.
No, it's not. It's legal.
It is.
It's legal.
No, it's illegal. It's
no,
illegal.
it's legal.
Yes, it is.
There
illegal.
are various levels of legality in each of those countries. Yes, it is legal.
Okay, maybe there's various levels of number 1. Plus 2, women are going in traditionally, this is across the globe. When times are tough, men resort to violence, women to sex. That's how it works. Whether you like that or not, whether you think I'm sexist or not, that's just a fact.
I agree.
When times are tough, men resort to violence, women resort to sex.
Yeah.
So that means now they have to go into a black market. If they're in a black market, those men are by default exploiting those women using violence for their sex.
Women, those are nations
and in
where
countries where there is better quality of life, those entering the sex industry aren't doing it out of need, they're doing it out of desire.
Correct.
Okay, so that's one. Again, there is no correlation that says because it is legal, it is safer. That is not a fact. That is not supported by data. Look, there are 55,000 sex workers recorded in in the Netherlands versus the over 250,000 in each of those nations in the top 5. In fact, Netherlands is ranked 55 out of 130 nations, Switzerland 66, New Zealand 103. The examples that people like to point to are isolated nations. And when you look at the entire world and look at the total result, just in the sense of, is it reducing crime? Is it reducing violence against women? Is it actually having a net positive impact?
The study that I'm reading that you're quoting isn't talking about violence against women or violence against prostitution. It's talking about violent crime in general in the entire country and whether or not it reduces violent crime.
The problem is there's a lot of studies.
Different
there is no conclusive. There is a lot of.
I'm not claiming that it reduces violent crime across the board.
I would argue that if you have more violent crime, it will affect more. If you have more violent crime, you have a less stable society. If the society is less stable, you have less people being able to have steady work, which means more women going towards sex, more men going towards violence. So I would argue that this is not helping your cause, Mike, in my view. Maybe I'm missing it. I feel it's the opposite. Well, I feel like if you have a more destabilized society, you're going to have more men going towards violence, more women going towards sex. I just feel that's going to happen naturally.
I would also like to talk about the economic impacts of not having legalized sex work, because we're really missing out on a revenue stream for taxation. And then
now you're going to make me angry.
At the end of the day, we also have to end up paying their bills when they can't access healthcare. or other social safety nets, because like for a general COVID had an extremely negative impact on the sex trade.
Sure.
A lot of those people had to end up filing bankruptcy, ended up having to, front money for healthcare and those types of things onto the public. And
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that that's good either. I would much rather have them have an IRA,
you're winning me back, Charlie. You're winning me back now.
be able to pay for themselves and pay for their own social safety nets than have everyone else, have to pay for them.
You swore at me by saying taxation, but you got me back with that one. Okay,
about people paying for themselves.
Okay. We're good with that. Well, you got me back. Okay, we're all good. No, I do think that is a point on just financially, right? Do we look to be forward with you? I think the cultural aspect matters. I know, Charlie, you don't care as much about that, but I do. I think it does affect people. I think it is important. And if I had a choice, I would rather have less women in the sex working trade than other trades. However, I'm not prepared to pass a law. I'm not prepared to put my hands on woman's body. That's my personal opinion, which I would prefer. And I think if we have a better economy, culture, and environment in general, it is my belief less women will go into sex work. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong on this.
No, because
but that's what I believe.
Debunk that too, because there's a reason why it's called the oldest profession in humanity, in the universe, in history, because there is always going to be a segment of the population, either through personal desire, ease, and comfort, or by coercion, that are going to go into this. This is something. But
they're going to go into the right reasons and mentally and physically be happier about their decision and it not take such a toll. I work with women in the sex industry all the time, and you either do it for the right reasons or you don't. And when you do it for the wrong reasons, you usually have to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol, and then that leads to even bigger problems down the line. And then you're having unsafe sex because you're not in your right mind to make sure that you're using protection or verifying the men. Reversed. And that's when you put yourself into really bad situations.
But I'm going to touch this now, Charlotte. This is the part I want to bring up here, right? You're right. That's why I think the cultural aspect matters. Because when a woman goes into sex work, a chunk of her world, whatever chunk depends on her world is going to disown her. Whatever that chunk is, right? Some people it's a huge chunk, some it's a smaller chunk, but a chunk disowns her. That's our culture. Again, you can be mad at me about it. That's the fact. So now all of a sudden a woman loses a chunk of her social structure. That is one of the reasons, not the only, obviously, where she is going to now begin to self-medicate, right? She's going to be like, I've lost this or I've lost that. So now she wants to erase part of that, and she's going to begin to do X, Y, or Z and become self-destructive. So I think that's a part of it. That's my point on the cultural issue.
I think the part about the culture aspect is I wasn't saying it's not important, because it is. What I was looking for was the root cause of why that culture viewed a specific thing in that way. Because the culture changes. There's a root cause for why that changes over time. It's the same reason why now blue is associated with boys and, pink's associated with girls. 100 years ago, it was the opposite. So those are fluctuations and changes, but there's usually a root cause as to why it is. Sometimes it could be religious or puritanical. Sometimes it can be sexism or racism, but there are multiple contributing factors as to why a specific group of people would feel that the sex industry is bad. You go into the Netherlands and more people now are like, meh, it's not that big of a deal. Women who work in the sex industry in the Netherlands, they have significant others and they're able to integrate into society and they're able to change careers more effectively. Whereas in, here in the United States, it's still highly, highly looked down upon. And I think that speaks to the culture and their underlying moral values and what those moral values are that then kind of shape the way that the culture behaves. I always love to speak to that.
I always love the way that the left tries to cherry pick certain places at certain points in time to try and make their point. Like Netherlands, a place of 17 million people, which is about the size of New York City. And that's just the perfect. See, they've got the solution. No, it doesn't work, especially when you scale up. It doesn't work.
I never said it was perfect.
I didn't say that. I didn't say you said it was perfect. I was making my allegory. But more importantly, let's think about this, because Larry, we actually had you had your Monday night roundtable, and we were talking with a Leanne Starr in part about this very same subject. People can go and look at that video, that conversation that we had about OnlyFans, about online, about sex work, and the negative connotation, not forget the connotation, the impact morally and personally for many of these people, especially on OnlyFans, that are going in based on this slogan, this idea that you're going to be able to hit utopia, that this is going to improve your life. And the net result is nothing like that, that we actually see that it has a deep impact on their relationships, on their personal lives, on their self-worth. They're dehumanized. And no matter how many times we can point to and say, well, it works for the Netherlands. Well, that's one out of what, 200
But I know
countries
many
in the
women
world?
and men
It
here
doesn't
and queer
work.
people in the United States, it's working for them just fine.
And I can point to even more women. And again,
Of course,
studies
because
are,
it's illegal, though, and that and because the culture views them as being immoral in some capacity or the other. If they had a more supportive culture, it would be completely different, because when
You
they
know what?
wanted to leave, they wouldn't have to then feel like they're tied down to this weight and baggage of a decision that they might have made once in their life.
Let me say something really crazy. Perhaps in the history of mankind, in every nation and civilization that has existed, including to this day, there might be a reason why we have, as a species, universally said, there's a problem with prostitution. There's a problem with what we now call sex work, as it's being renamed and redefined, and we're trying to make it normalized. There's a problem with this. And it is a significant issue, both morally, culturally, societally, and as individuals. There is an inherent problem. And there's a reason why for 10,000 years we've had a problem with it. And I understand the promise is if we do this because we can, it will lead to utopia. Except we're not saying, should we do this? Why haven't we done this in the past? Because it's something we easily could have. And perhaps it's actually leading us to a dystopia again. And I think that's more accurate.
I do want to be clear. I don't think Charlotte or I were saying this is utopia.
No, I'm not saying you are. I'm saying, but that's at the end, if we take the arguments that are being made, not necessarily by you guys directly, but in the general argument that is being made, which is coming from the left almost entirely, then the ultimate outcome, the final conclusion, the logical consequence of that is the promise of utopia. We get this all the time. We get it with drugs. We get it with almost every single one of the policies of the left. Is if you just
I'm going to disagree with you, Mike. I
utopia.
hear the left talk, and I agree with many of the left's policies on social issues. And the issue actually
is, like throughout history, that
hold on 1 second, Charlotte. I think that what most people are saying, and I agree with this, it's not utopia, it's harm reduction. That's the phrase being used. Harm reduction. We legalize, not saying it'll be perfect, but that it will be less bad. We will reduce the harm. And that's what the phrase I use, and I agree with that. I've been very forward. I would like no women to be in sex work if possible. That would be amazing utopian world that they would do it, but because they choose to, and not because there's no law, because they've chosen that we can do all kind of awesome things and we're all happy. That would be utopia, right? If we could, we're never going to get there. But my point is, it will reduce harm. I think that's true. I'm sorry, Charlotte, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. No worries. I think you're making this claim that throughout history, sex work has always been a point of shame, and that's just factually inaccurate. Even in Egyptian times, in ancient Chinese civilizations, there have been points in history where sex work was seen as therapy, and they were actually seen as sacred people who had healing powers. So I just think it's really inappropriate to make that claim that sex work has always just been this taboo, horrible thing in every culture. It's just the same as like when people say like trans has just always been horrible in culture and nobody has ever been trans, and there hasn't been any societies that have been accepting of them, because that's completely inaccurate too.
I don't know how we're getting to trans from this.
I'm making a comparison. We can make comparisons because it's quite similar. People make these big, grand, sweeping statements about culture and history.
No, that's a leap off a cliff.
Let me grab a couple of comments here. People are commenting.
We got lots of them.
Let me grab a couple of these if we could. So Joe, of course, says, but Larry, it's illegal, so it's bad. Right to jail right away. You know, I agree with that. I think illegality is all that matters to me. I love the law. Government's always correct. Please don't clip this, Mike. I'll punish you. Anyway, yes, of course, no. So yes, obviously he's joking, and I agree completely. So yes, Joel says, we waste tons of money and resources trying to enforce prostitution laws. Legalize it, save that money, but also reduce sex trafficking. No, I think, right, he says the right word, reduce. I don't think you can end sex trafficking. There are still too many men and women who are okay exploiting each other, and they're going to do it. But I do believe he's right that you do lessen, because you do lessen the market, right? You have less people who are open to it, less things happening. And you also have something else, which I like. You free up law enforcement to stop worrying about two adults having sex and to now focus on adults and kids having sex, right? Which is what I want cops focusing on that. I don't want them focusing on
getting the children out of the sex industry.
I know that people want that. I know that is the goal and the hope, and I agree with the hope and that ideal. But we have data, and I understand it is conflicting data. There is data on both sides saying the opposite thing. It's inconclusive, but what we can clearly understand is that as much people want that to be the hope, it isn't the reality. It doesn't end human trafficking. In fact, it may. Some studies say it does increase it. Some studies say it might decrease it. They're not sure, but it doesn't. It has not reduced it. There is no universal or consistent
everyone to go and read the study that Mike is citing for themselves.
No, not one study. I'm citing 24.
Right, but the study on Amark's foundation, to read it yourself and read the language thoroughly, because I think that there are certain terms and certain aspects of this conversation in that study is being convoluted and confused with how the study was performed and implemented.
I'm using that as the example that there is no consistent singular view on this and no consistent set of data that says that this is what is being hoped for, that we're getting the promise over and over again. This will make it right. This will make it work. And I'm telling you, that's not been true historically, and that's not true, at least to all data that we can
generic
understand
on this one
currently.
Prohibition, when in anything.
I don't like prohibition.
Yes, but that's what this is. This is a form of prohibition, right? When you have any form of prohibition, always, this is throughout the world, you will always increase the black market in some form, some way, some shape. You will always increase the black market. That is a fact throughout history. When you end prohibition, you will always lessen the black market, right? That's how you're right. To your point, Mark, there is no utopia. There will always be a black market. I agree. But there's no doubt that every single time you put on prohibition on something, you make the black market larger. When you remove it, you make it smaller. This is why I can't imagine sex trafficking, which is the black market, literally, that it won't get lower. Right? I just can't imagine that. It just in every other case.
When you're required to take health screening tests, I cannot imagine it not helping to prevent sexually transmitted diseases.
Okay, so one,
access to free condoms and contraceptive. Do you know it's illegal to carry contraceptive with you in certain neighborhoods in the United States because they'll say that you're a prostitute?
In the Philippines too.
Let me go and give you a hypothetical, because you asked for an example, and let's walk through this with a mental exercise. So we had in America, as an example, the mafia decided once we had alcohol prohibited. So the mafia said this is an open market, and they decided to have bars, illegal underground bars and clubs selling alcohol. People took the opportunity, crime took the opportunity to abuse the law that existed and to abuse individuals. You're telling me that sex trafficking, which we are seeing on the rise because of the open borders in the United States, something that we are seeing grow, is so lucrative that we are seeing the cartels start to switch from drugs and more into human trafficking. If we were to make it legalized, you mean to tell me that you don't believe that the mafia and other institutions that use businesses as covers for their illegality would not import these workers through the open borders and put them into these brothels and or buy off doctors, which we see all the time? We know there is fraud in medicine where there is worker compensation fraud, as an example. We know these things do exist. We know people will lie, and whether at government level or individual level, lie to be able to enable this.
Let me use your exact example. What actually happened when they made booze legal? The mob moved away from booze. Literally, the mob moved away from booze. It went to other things, which is what mobs do. But not just that. There was literally less violence. Look at the data. The most amount of cops by percentage killed in America was during Prohibition. That literally was the most amount of dead cops came during Prohibition. And it's like a cliff. Prohibition ends, cops start dying. It's like a cliff, stop dying. It's like a cliff. It's literally true. So yes, there was less violence because there was less of a black market. Did the mob go away? No, I'm not promising at all. I'm not promising utopia. I'm saying that people literally went and got jobs. I'm not making that up. People who were in the black market opened up a regular bar. They became bouncers in bars instead of mafia enforcers. That actually happened. So yes, that happened. And I'll go to your point. Let's say I'm a trafficker and I traffic people into the legal stuff. Well, the women there will know it's legal. They'll just call the cops. Trafficker in jail. That's literally how it works. Yes,
We would
that's
hope
why
it would
I
work that way.
wouldn't bring my illegal trafficked people into a legal brothel, because then I'm going to jail. It's gonna be a sting operation, and I'm getting captured and going to jail. So I do think it will be less.
I understand the altruistic viewpoint, and perhaps it's because I am somewhat of a pessimist. I like to say a realist. The world doesn't work in our ideals the way we would want it to. And I understand you've made a great counterpoint to my point, and I can't say that I understand it. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I think that if we are looking at this realistically, we have to understand that there are massive negatives that are not going to go away. And no matter how much we hope, wish, and pray that they will, it's not going to change that these realities exist in the world now, and they will continue to exist. And if we're looking at this, we have to look at this from a different perspective. I believe the biggest problem with this is that prostitution, call it sex work, whatever you want to call it, prostitution has a net negative consequence on the society and on individuals, both on a moral and cultural level, and that it negatively impacts, it detracts, it creates more dehumanization, which then leads to chaos in the world and for those individuals. And I have yet to see any argument that could change that.
Charlotte, could you work? Because I want to reinforce Mike's point, Charlotte, and I want you to take this up because I want to reinforce. I think he's right in this. There are damages that do come from this, and it's because of your culture that you don't like. I get it, but it still exists. There are going to be women now who are in the sex trade now who are going to struggle and have harder times finding male relationships if they want them because of their past. That's true. It will be harder. Not impossible, but it will be harder because of their sex work past. There will be hard to find regular work because, again, of a cultural bias towards them. There will be pain. There also will be people who are young, 18, 19, who wish they hadn't done it because they weren't mature enough to make a decision when they were 18, 19 years old. I think there is going to be pain that's going to happen. And pornography is now a new addiction, particularly for young males. It's a new addiction also. So there is social damage here done. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So when we talk about sex work and the negative impacts it has, although not to the extent that you're talking about, but you could, again, apply those same questions to the construction industry and to other ones that are hard felt. You could literally ask the same questions, not to the degree of the impact, of course. Mm-hmm. But again, secondly, when we talk about the negative aspects, a lot of them come with, again, the stigma, the criminalization. And when you move beyond that and you do talk to the women and the individuals who this has been a powerful and actually positive experience for, because I have to review lots of these interviews with sex workers all the time for the written material that I do, is that they say that they enjoy what they do. They feel like they're giving a benefit to their clients, that their clients thank them, and that sometimes they're not even having sex with their clients. They're giving them intimacy that they wouldn't otherwise get. In the United Kingdom, they will actually give you money as a part of your insurance if you have a disability that stops you or prevents you from having intimate relationships, and give you money to go to the Netherlands and seek out prostitution because they believe that sex is a right. And we talk about this a lot in regards to men feeling disheartened and feeling like they can't contribute to society and feeling like they're not a part of our culture anymore because they can't get access to intimacy with women. despite, being told for a long time that that's something that they're supposed to have in their lives, that this is one avenue for them to get it without violence.
Charles,
And so I would prefer for them to be able to have access to that type of intimacy, but do it in a safe way.
Charles,
in a safe way that's destigmatized. So not only does the women and the people participating as prostitutes not have to feel discriminated against or feel that there's some sort of taboo shame around it, but also that the Johns can go ahead and enjoy themselves as well.
Before we get to Roger's comment, and I see you, Roger, thank you for the super chat, because it's funny. I love you, Roger. Charlie, one thing I wanted to ask, because you brought it up and I think it's interesting. You're saying you have the interviews and these are very positive messages. Have you had interviews with women in this field that have had negative?
Oh, yes, of course. The majority are
because
negative.
You're presenting the positive statements. What are the negative ones?
So the negative ones are that my family and people around me have disowned me. That the men in my life won't date me or take me seriously because of this industry. That I have been sexually assaulted by police officers because there's no one I can turn to because this is a criminalized act. That they can't partake in the social safety system as others can because they're not paying taxes. And so thus they're not protected under that. When they do get raped, they're taken to the hospital and their needs are not. You asked me a question, so can I please tell you the answer to that question? Going to the hospital and not being able to get access to care because people don't believe that they've been raped because of the industry that they're in. And then also not having access to be able to carry contraceptive on them. As I was saying earlier, many of these women are scared to have a condom on them because if they get caught with a condom, they're automatically assumed to be a prostitute. So we've actually made it like extremely unsafe for anyone to practice this. And thus it makes everyone involved unsafe, the men and the women and anyone else involved in the industry. I would love to hear
from women that tell me. I've never heard any woman saying that because they have a condom on them that they've been considered a sex worker.
That's a real thing.
I don't know any
been
women
discussed
who say
in
that.
the news recently and highlighted as being a public safety concern.
I've never heard that from all the.
And I think, again, we're talking about a group of people instead of letting them speak for themselves. And they clearly have outlined what they need from society and the things that are harming them. And then we continue to say, well, there's this study and there's that study, when the people themselves are asking to be a part of the society and telling you what they need. And the women do this and the people involved do it all the time.
Again, it depends on who's asking and what question they're asking and how many people are actually speaking.
So I think they've been pretty consistent in their message for the last 3 decades.
Let me grab some comments.
You got Roger.
Super chat, Roger. Boss, you are not a realist. You're a killjoy. You don't want people to have fun. Well, that's true.
I love you, Roger.
That's true. Yeah.
I know. There is an aspect of joy that I am killing there in my argument.
I do know Mike well, and his intentions are good. He's trying to make the world a better place. That's actually true. You may disagree with him, but he's actually trying to make the world a better place. I do know that. Andrew says, this is one of the best conversations the three of you have had. Well done, Larry, Voss, and Charlotte. Look at that.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks.
I like that. Nicola's on your side. Let's go, Dr. Burnett. There we go. Yes. Joe says, sex is healthcare. I like that one. Julie says, as if porn wasn't damaging 50 to 60 years ago. Yes, but there's a difference though now, right? Pornography can be very good for certain people and can be very bad for certain people, just like many things like alcohol and all of those things. The difference here is there was no internet, right? And so you had to, 56 years ago, you had to go try to find your dad's magazine or something or whatever, that kind of thing. Now, and look, I deal with it. I have kids. My daughters had access to porn at 11 or 12 years old.
Oh,
that was not a thing, right? That and
VCR pornography access. At that.
Yes, all types of crazy. And to be forward, one of my daughters found it because she was looking for something childish, and there was cartoonish, childish porn in it.
Hentai, yeah.
Correct. And she saw it because of it. That's the difference. So yes, I'm not an enemy of porn. But porn is like any other vice. It can be terrible for people and it can be fun for some people.
And it does shape culture and expectations around sex, because if no one in your family is talking to you about what safe or like realistic sex is, and all you see is like, men spitting in women's mouths and the disgusting things that you can find on the internet, then yeah, that you're going to think that that's natural. And that comes
Absolutely.
from, again, not having safeguards in the pornography industry that allow people to own their own content and get to say, no, actually, I don't want to do that. Because traditionally it was very much ran just like you had a pimp, a guy who would find you a specific, and it still ran this way, would find you a studio and a producer. They would say, you have to do this or we're just going to find some other girl. And she had no control or power over the content that was created. And I think that that's why OnlyFans has been such a success, is because now people are having the control over their content, and it's showing that people are still willing to pay for it. And I think that that's the real beautiful thing around that, is because with Pornhub, it's free. You get what you get. You just turn it on and you'll get anything. But with OnlyFans, you pay for that content. So you're choosing what you're actually interested in viewing. And I think that that's opened the door, particularly for non-traditional body forms. Like you see people who are not stereotypical white and skinny people all over doing porn now that you normally wouldn't see. There are OnlyFans dedicated to like larger women.
I'm not sure that's a good thing. I'm not sure that's a good thing. I like the ownership part of that. I do. I think that's great. I love that.
People are unable to be supermodel skinny, and it's okay if you're at your ideal
porn
BMI
isn't about
and it doesn't
supermodels.
Look like a supermodel.
Porn isn't
Not
about
all
supermodels.
of us can be 5'9" and 130 pounds.
That isn't most of porn. And matter of fact, if we're talking about porn, there's always been a diversity of things that are out there, and always will be. And same thing with OnlyFans, because the same things that you find in porn, you find in OnlyFans as well. So let's not try and say that there's some kind of higher class or some kind of different.
There are doctors who specialize in talking about this and have specifically proven that the diversity that you're talking about was very specific racial dynamics, and that was not diversity.
In which country? Because you're not telling me it's the same thing in Japan as it is in the United States.
There was a literal
Middle Eastern
governor. She was running for governor. I forgot it. She was a porn star who was running for governor, and she got in trouble for this back when Schwarzenegger times. She said something like, "Oh, if I need to, I'll just, have sex with an old guy, or if worse comes to worse, I'll just have sex with a black guy." That's what she said. So, and that's just the porn industry. So she was literally saying that having sex with a black guy is the worst thing you can do. Like that was. I think there really is. There's clearly some issues in the porn industry.
Oh, for sure.
I'm not saying there isn't. There absolutely is. Again, this is the whole thing. We see it is the entire industry of sex work is morally, socially, and individually corrupting and dehumanizing. And we see
a lot of it is.
Examples.
I think a lot of it is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is. By the way, having sex with a black guy is awesome. So,
that's why there's a saying: once you go,
there
black,
we go. Absolutely.
Go
so just for clarity, it's not the worst; it's the best. Damn it. Okay. So anyway,
jealousy. There's lots of jealousy out there in the world.
It was jealous, and that's what a lot of philosophical theorists have discussed. Is that comes from dick envy and feelings surrounding inadequacy and slavery.
I don't know about all that. I just know
I'll send you some books because there's some really interesting political debates about pornography and racism.
Molly Smash, who actually wrote a book on sex work, Memoirs of a Sex Worker, I think is the name of the book. You can check her out.
Really good. It's really good work.
There we go. So she already read it. Yes. She says sex work is always work. She goes on to say,
it's hard work. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like in my memoir, I talk about how I worked at a strip club for an entire summer while I was going to school. And I talk about how difficult that was. Like my knees would come back bruised and beaten up. Like you have to deal with men hitting on you all the time. Like you have to deal with the people who own the strip clubs. Like it's horrible.
I didn't know you wanted a strip tour. I love you even more now. I got to read your book now. Now I have to. I love you even more now. That's awesome. I love that. Very good. Nicola says we all need to I think he means disassociate the negative imagery from the word prostitution. Prostitution, if accepted by local, state, federal law, cannot be taxed or regulated as such. It could possibly bring more revenue. See, I don't like the tax part. But by developing and contributing to critical infrastructure at any level. Yes, should be viewed as professional care, trait, skill. This would also eliminate a huge percentage of criminal element, mafia, all that kind of stuff. And the point I want to bring up is the reason why I push back on the tax so much. And I know you might, Larry, Libertarian. No. I am. But if we heavily tax this, we will keep a black market.
I don't think it needs to be heavily taxed.
Well, that's how it works, though, right? The sin tax always does that. That's why I don't like that concept. We can go there now if we want to. I don't want to go to the concept of sin tax. I want it, if we're going to legalize it, make it like anything else, not a special, because you're in the sex work, now you got to pay 20% tax on this and 15% tax on that, because we're going to keep a black market. My goal, and it's just my personal goal, I want safer women. So the less of a black market we have, the safer the women are going to be. Doesn't mean they're going to be safe. It's going to be jerks. It's going to be stuff. But I would like it to be as low, or the norm, the same taxation as anyone else does. Because if we do that, now women will be safer.
OnlyFans is taxed the same as any regular 9-to-5 job is. And I think that that's the way that it should be. It shouldn't get an 100%. Extra tax because people deem it morally sinful. I just think that, they should be able to have a social safety net that protects them when things go bad, but they should also contribute to that social safety net to be able to receive it.
So Roger's messaging me, goes, Larry, how you know you have sex with black guys? Maybe I have, Roger. Don't be jealous. Maybe I have. Maybe more than you. How about that? Like that? Maybe more than you. Mad because I get more black guys than you? Come on, don't be jealous. That's good.
Oh man, I really wish you would be governor of New York. That'd be fantastic, Larry.
I could see, yeah.
V. Lou Perez says, will sex workers be allowed to discriminate on the basis of race, sex? And this I want to bring up because I got to tell you, in case you haven't seen this, Molly Smash, Delta Asher, was actually on Tim Pool's show about a month or two ago.
Cool.
And Tim was joking. He was saying, well, so now, could you have a job description that says must give BJs once a week, right, as part of the job description?
I saw that.
And she said, Molly's open. She doesn't play games. Yes. She's like, yeah, why can't you? Yeah, why not? And my joke was, which no one said, was, okay, great. So I put that now in my description. I want to get a BJ every week from my admin assistant, but then men apply. And I'm like, no, do I have to hire the guy now? Or am I discriminating? Or what if someone who's not hot, right? Because I only want the hot woman, right? So now whoever I think is not hot, right? My description of hot does not show up. Can I discriminate? Go, well, you're too tall, too short, whatever I think. Can I discriminate against that person?
I think for sex work, it'd be really hard. It would be really hard to enforce, right? Because if someone felt like, oh, well, I don't like this person's vibe, they're making me feel uncomfortable. And then that person turned around and said, oh, it was because I'm X, Y, and Z race or gender. And then that person then is in trouble. It will stop people from being safe. And so I do think that sex work needs to be some sort of like protection area where you can choose to not provide service to anyone for any reason. But again, John's discriminating against
hold on. But no, wait a minute now.
Sex industry.
Hold on. Charlie, if I bring on someone as my admin assistant, whoever that person is, right? Most admin assistants to this day are still female, but some are male. So if I bring her an admin assistant now and I give her the rules, you got to show up 9 to 5, you get an hour lunch, whatever is the rules that we agree upon. She goes, yep, it works. We're all good. You got to be available, to do this kind of paperwork, blah, 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 blah. You must know this. You must know Excel, whatever. I got all the rules. She gets it. She does it. She has to control my calendar. All good. If I say, now I need you to book me a flight to so-and-so, and that was part of our thing, she can't go, no, I'm not booking you a flight. I'm like, no, travel was in the rules. You knew that you were going to book my travel when I hired you. She can't go, no, or she gets fired, right? Because we agreed you're going to book my travel. I don't like working with Expedia. I don't care. That's the job. But if the job says you have to give me sexual favors or whatever that is on Thursdays or whatever is the rule we made up, you can't go, I have a headache. It's the same thing if we go that level.
I mean, if you are sick, you can say, I can't do that right now. I'm sick. But I understand what you're saying.
Right.
Again, I think what you're describing and what I described were two different situations. My situation
maybe
was talking about like the hiring of a specific like situation. Like if you're going in and because at any moment in the hiring process, you can go, I don't really want this job. Bye.
Oh, got it. Okay.
As a sex worker, at any point, you can go like, I don't want to be a part of this job anymore and leave. You shouldn't be able to be then sued because the person wants to say, oh, they didn't want to have
Got
sex
it.
with me because I am from X, Y, and Z, subclass of people.
But I would want to shift into something else, though. We have separate classes of workers in a way. For example, clergy, for example, attorneys, right? If I tell Mike, my friend, hey, I killed this guy, he can call the cops right now and turn me in. But if Mike is clergy, he can't. If Mike's an attorney, he can't. Now, if I say I'm going to kill this guy, he can turn me in no matter what. Doesn't matter what it is. But
Well, that's not
if
entirely correct. That's not entirely correct.
if I'm
If you're an attorney, the only time client, just to clarify for people, because it's a misconception. If you're an attorney and someone tells you that they've committed a crime, by law, you're required to actually turn them in. And the only time this client, if they are your client and you are having a privileged conversation, then that's correct. Otherwise, they get thrown in jail. Clergy, only if you're in the act of confession, and that's something that's not every religion has.
That's what I mean. I don't mean if I'm in a bar talking to some random lawyer. I literally mean
I'm trying to understand.
If I'm confession, yes, right? Unless I'm saying I'm going to do a thing, then they can say whatever. But if I'm just saying I can. I feel like we have to somehow, if we do this, and I'm not if America's ready for legalizing prostitution at all. I don't know if we are. But if we are, I feel like we got to make something special about that for two reasons.
You can't talk about people's sexual kinks outside of the employment situation.
Something
That's
like
not
that.
Cool. You have to protect your clients. And I think most pros would, because they want their client service back. But I'm sure that there have been situations, and I can think of one with Trump, where, someone just decided to reveal certain things about their sexual desires or acts because they're angry at them or because they weren't coming back as their client. Yeah. And that's not okay.
But there's two things I want to bring up. Number one is, in other words, if you're a lawyer, there are other things you kind of can't and shouldn't do, right? Because you're a lawyer. If you're clergy, there are kind of other things you probably can't or shouldn't do because you're clergy. And I feel like if you're a sex worker, that maybe you shouldn't mix and match those two things. In fact, to a point, there's also psychologists, some therapists have similar places, right? So if I'm going to be someone's therapist, I probably don't want to also be their coworker. Or I probably don't also want to be their boss if I'm going to be their therapist or their lawyer. So maybe if I'm going to be that person's sex worker, I probably don't want to be their boss or work for them in other ways. You're probably going to have to carve out sex work into some specific thing similar to psychotherapist, lawyer, and or clergy. Am I wrong here?
Something like that. I mean, there's a reason why so many businesses frown upon having coworkers dating, or if you're dating someone who's your boss. And there's a whole bunch of things about that because it does get tangled and there are levels of complication. There is pillow talk. I mean, for centuries.
Yeah.
I mean, Mata Hari, one of the greatest spies. Why was she so fantastic? She kept having sex with men to these generals and getting all the plans and sharing them. And she was fantastic at it. It was a pillow talk. It's a reality. It happens.
So I think there has to be that. Charlie, am I wrong here? Do you think that we should just
there has to be some sort of code of ethics. And I think that there are some sex worker groups, global groups and United States-based groups who have code of ethics that they discuss. And obviously this is much more of a conversation for higher end sex workers than it is for necessarily people who are working on the streets or are in it for
I would say anybody.
I
think anybody.
No, I'm saying it should be anybody, but this is a very privileged conversation
to be having
within the sex industry. So for lots of sex workers, I'm sure they've never heard of these things, but there are groups of sex workers who, work as escorts and in higher end pornography who have these kind of code of ethics that they've discussed. And it's a very well thought out industry and they've, it's not like they're pushing an agenda that hasn't been described and built into a manifesto for sex workers for a long time. It's just usually, again, that's the privileged who are able to have those conversations versus the people who are doing sex work to survive.
Let me grab the audience for fast. Guys, if you like what you're hearing, it's a good conversation. And do me a favor, click that like button. If you like it, click the like button. Don't diss me. Click the like button, right? It's important. Do that. Please do that. If you're watching on Twitter, retweet this right now. Just retweet it. Let people know that this is going on. Thank you for the super chats. I do appreciate that tremendously. But more importantly, there are two people here who are giving us a good hour of their time who are trying their best to show us some love. So let's show them some love. Why don't we follow Michael if we can? Follow him on Twitter at MV Consult. And please follow Charla at Venture Novelist on Instagram. Follow them both. See what they're doing. Their descriptions are all in both YouTube and Facebook. Check what they're doing. I appreciate all the time that you guys are giving us. So let me ask you, before we wrap this up, what am I missing? Is there something else we should be talking about?
In reference to sex work or just in general?
You tell me. What's going on, Mike? Give me the lowdown.
Well, let's see. 80,000 emails from Biden hidden from the public. We've got Hamas. The colleges are losing their minds. We now got a student over in Cornell. This is one of.
Did you talk about this last weekend, or are you talking about this coming up weekend?
No, I'm talking about yesterday. There was an event.
No, when are you talking about it on your show?
Oh, when am I? Oh, sorry. No Soundbites Allowed every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I go through all of these kinds of things. And so this is ongoing. The persecution we were seeing because of the Hamas Israel war that's going on, which Iran has a big part of. So there's a lot of intricate things happening right now.
So 2:30 is on Sunday. Charlotte, talk to us. How do we buy your book?
Yeah, you just check it out on Amazon. I have a couple books out. I have Memoirs of a Venture Novelist, which was my first book that I put out. I have another one called I Love Drugs, an ethnography of America's addiction. And so there's a lot of things in the works. I have a couple other academic books coming out within the next year or so, but I'm hoping to go back and write a book about housing in the United States, specifically on HUD and the history behind HUD.
We are rocking and rolling. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. You guys, thank you so much for giving us an hour of our time. I'll be on tonight. I've been not doing shows. I know I've been crazy busy, but I've decided I'm going to do a show tonight. I don't know what yet, but I will. By the way, Andrew Cuomo was on Bill Maher last week. That's enough to piss me off. I'll do that.
Oh, God, that pissed me off.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it yet. I'll have to go check it out.
He's amazing. I can't stand him, but God,
he's coming back.
God, he is. And I warned people he'd come back, and the monster isn't dead. We didn't put a stake in his heart. I'm kidding, NSA. I'm kidding. They'll be mad at me. I'm kidding. Joke. All right, guys. Have a good one. I will see you all